So when we all look at the press, the media, what we read online, etc., it's a pretty sort of, I think, sort of tough world right out there at the moment for leaders in any sector and in any industry. And if I think about, just in my own organisation, where there's sort of yearly budget for leadership and management development, not to say, and I wouldn't say that that was wasted, that we had some great successes with people, lots of people moving on in the organisation, moving upwards, sometimes moving sectors. And it's great to see a lot of people I used to work with in many of my previous organisations have really moved on. But as such, my proposition today is that those billions invested in leadership and management development, we do need to continue investing in that, but actually look at what we require of our leaders in a different way. Organisations are demanding different things, and as leadership development people, I think that we should be looking at how we develop them and what we develop them in a different way. And just some of the press that's coming out recently, there's loads of surveys out there at the moment about engaging people and engagement strategies. And here's that first sort of fact there from the Hay Group and the survey that they did. 53% of our leaders create a demotivational working climate every day for their people. And, isn't that a terrible sort of indictment of what we have invested in leaders over the past years? But, you've only got to drive down the motorway, you want to get stuck in a traffic jam, look at people on the tube, and how many people actually look happy in terms of on their way to work and ready to engage and motivate their people, customers, clients, patients, whatever, what a sector they work in. Organisations are really struggling to attract great people. And in some sectors actually keep great people now, despite the age of austerity. And yet we have 2.5 million people without work. Whatever stats you believe, it's a pretty big number because of the lack of the right skill sets. And leaders have to engage in a very different way with people coming into the workforce today. Rising depression in the UK. Every employee being asked to do more with less. And many of our leaders have never worked, I would propose, in a sort of time of austerity, if you like. I think austerity for my generation, maybe most of you on this webinar today, is something that's a term that's sort of come out from history as opposed to reality of maybe the last sort of 20 or 25 years where, Thatcher's children have come out of school, graduated from university, and pretty much all they've known is a time of increasing wealth, increasing property prices, and business on the up, apart from maybe the last sort of 3 to 4 years. And who knows how long that might continue. So moving through to our next slide, the main proposition for me today is it's time to change. It's time to change, if you like, what we expect of our leaders and what ultimately we then develop in terms of their competencies, their behaviours and their skills. And the next slide takes you to a model I've pulled together, 21st century leadership. And I think all of us in leadership circles, whether we're working with people to look at talent or leadership programs or developing organisations, we could come up with many different sort of skills and attributes and behaviours that we'd want people to display and want people to do really well in leadership positions in our businesses. I've pulled out 4 here, which I think are 4 critical factors that leaders of the 21st century need to develop, we need to measure them on, and we need to encourage them to work with. So taking a look at the next slide and looking at authenticity. We just take this out of the sort of the leadership environment, really. Authenticity is something that is increasingly being challenged in life and in society. Not just in the UK, but here's some sort of key facts from the UK. The sort of financial services industry, reputation of the last 5 years has been shredded. We've got the PPI scandal paying out, I believe, something like £25 billion in claims so far. Got the horse meat scandal, so are we quite sure what we're getting in our burgers or lasagna? I'm not sure anymore. And tax avoidance, so lots of well-documented cases with coffee shop providers and search engines for the internet where increasingly we're looking at organisations in very, very different lenses now. Organisations that previously perhaps wouldn't even have attracted much attention um, because we weren't aware of these things. But authenticity, I believe, is under threat as never before. So I think when followers turn up in organisations, their whole perception of authenticity, of trust, is being sort of damaged every day outside of work. What they need is leaders who turn up, who are authentic, who do generate trust, and be themselves in the workplace, and be honest and open with people, as well as forging those connections, genuine connections with the people, in order to motivate and engage them. Now, values and ethics are critical to that authenticity. And, maybe even sort of 5 years ago, ethics was probably something around healthcare or green companies or energy. Values have been part of companies now, part of the whole sort of OD and employee engagement space for probably the best part of 10 years or so. But such now, they're pretty much, I think we judge companies and we also judge leaders on those two aspects, values and ethics. And we make decisions based on what leaders display every day or what they don't display. And that was the next point in terms of, I think, there are quite a few of our leaders who really need to, focus on developing that authenticity, focus on connecting. And, a lot of leaders I work with, sometimes they're quite uncomfortable with developing that. They want to maintain some kind of distance between them and their people. And whilst, there are boundaries, there are professional lines to be drawn as such, a lot of leaders turn up and I think they're just, they're not aware of how they impact their people every day. Certainly, if you go with that first stat on the presentation today, then 53% of leaders are actively not being authentic with their people. So moving to our next pillar, and we go to resilience. And resilience is it's quite a new word in leadership development, and I think this is hugely borne out of the fact that because we're being asked to do more with less, because long hours and demanding sort of environments, fewer resources, fewer colleagues to work with. That's pretty much in every sector. There's some kind of challenge there, even if it's just a mental challenge of the fear of maybe making the wrong decision or losing your job or sort of being out of sort of favour in the organisation. I heard the other day that work-life balance is now being replaced with the phrase work-life flexibility, and I think the two have very, very different meanings. So ambiguity, complexity, and working in a grey, these are all things that face leaders every day, but as such, they're the things that take energy from us because they bring about situations that are not straightforward. They don't have linear solutions as such. And they take more energy to think about, sometimes stress about, sometimes worry about how to resolve that particular issue, what to do in that situation, who to talk to when there's nobody there as such. Managing change is something that most of our leadership programs will have an element of managing change in there. Here's a proposition for you. I think we should ban the phrase because change is pretty much it's the way working life is now. If you use a metaphor here, if you imagine sort of change at one time might come say once a year or at the end of a 3-year plan or when a new CEO started, almost like the sort of tide coming in on the beach. It goes in, it comes out. Where I think change now is much more about it's a sort of constant waves lapping on the beach. So the waves just hit all of the time, and even as the first one is just sort of going backwards off the shore, the next one's coming over. So people are facing waves of change now, and I think it is important. It's important we manage change. It's important we do the right communications. It's important we engage our stakeholders and all of that stuff that makes effective change management. But equally, I think the more we talk about change, that people see it as a sort of, there's an end to it. And as such, I don't think there is for the foreseeable future. I think that's the way work is now. So fitness, both mentally and physically, is required. And for those of you, I'm sure, much more expert than I in terms of resilience, that whole sort of, mental state, physical state is really important to be at the top of the game and really important in terms of preventing that whole sort of like toxins building up inside us, which create that sort of stress and then create that illnesses and sort of lack of well-being, if you like. So that's a key part of it. But equally, I think it's about developing that sort of mental power. I think about developing high performance. Leaders have to work on coping strategies, building resilience, and being at the top of the game most of the time. And for me, the final bit about sort of being at the top of the game most of the time is about thinking of the role of the team in that. So many people that I coach in leadership centres, particularly those who go into more strategic positions or they manage other managers, one of the first challenges they face is the fact that they physically can't do everything they used to do before. They need to trust their people. They need to delegate more. And for some people, that's a huge stretch as such. But those managers, if they don't do that, become increasingly stressed. They won't develop resilience. They just develop sort of coping with it or presenteeism that sometimes you see in some of the textbooks. And they really need to let go. They really need to engage those followers to do more in that space. So our third pillar on the next slide is called networked. And I think networks now are sort of a critical part of life, really. I mean, most of us, we looked on our phones, we might have Twitter or Facebook. We'd have maybe a BBC News website. We've got emails. We've got messaging facilities, maybe BlackBerry Messenger, or we've got text messaging. So networks are very much a fact of life outside of organisations. And I think networks and matrix are becoming much more common in organisations now, where organisations are delayering, it's flatter, there are fewer people to do things, there are much more merger and acquisition activity going on, or sort of reverse takeovers, that sort of thing. So organisations, particularly larger organisations, are very often sort of made up of lots of smaller or different or sort of maybe previously competing organisations. So the networks are critical to getting things done. We can no longer rely on the fact that, Susan is sat in the corner. I could always go to her and help me out with some IT issues, or David over there always help me out with finance. Very often in these organisations we're working today, we don't know who those people are. We can't put a face to the name. And as humans, that's quite a challenge for us to get over. But actually, as leaders, we need to learn how to connect in that way. We need to learn how to connect very quickly. We need to keep a broad sense of networks, not just internally, but also outside the organisation. There's a point there about external networks. I read a great book recently by a guy called Mike Moran. You can get it off Amazon for maybe about a tenner. And it's called The Guide to Everlasting Employability. Now, as a book title, for those of us who may be in, I don't know, the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th job, at this stage in our lives, what a great proposition, everlasting employability. 2 chapters in that book, and a lot of it's common sense, but 2 chapters are all about building networks and getting over, I don't do networks, I don't feel comfortable with that. So a really good book to have a look at, just for reminders, and particularly if you're involved in leadership development and you are looking to get people to think more broadly about careers, it's a great book to pitch at them. And finally, sort of, commercial awareness on that piece, really. The whole network piece is not just about the people. It's about facts, it's about resources, it's about ideas, it's about creativity. So leaders, encourage them to be curious about not just their own business market and sector, but others that are connected with theirs. So they constantly maintain, if you like, a sort of network of support people to get different perspectives on business challenges, what consumers are asking, what patients are looking for. And, broaden their knowledge not just of people, but actually their environment around them. Because that's really important in terms of surviving, being aware, but also, the resources may come from very surprising places for organisational challenges. Our final slide is on learning agility. And, for those of us who've been in this field for some time, this is a relatively new phrase, first started to appear in sort of executive development probably 4 or 5 years ago. And now we see it much more in the fields of like learning development, OD, talent development. We're looking for this as a quality in people. We've got an expectation of people in terms of moving faster, learning faster, and almost like that just-in-time knowledge sort of load up really. So the thing for me is, I mean, the habit of learning is continuous and it isn't just formal. And, there's lots of things in terms of, how we learn really where, there's lots of the 70-20-10 debates at the moment, which, some companies are actively using to reduce L&D costs. Some companies are really looking at it in terms of how do we enable that 70% of learning in much more exciting, formal, but actually in a way that people really get engaged with it. So learning is all around us and it isn't just formal and thinking outside the box in terms of the way we learn, but also engaging learners, I think is a critical task of L&D and OD and talent within organisations, but also for the individual. And the individual without learning, whether that's technical or behavioural or some knowledge aspects, is really just going to stagnate and die in a leadership capacity. I think the second point in that first bullet point is about self-limiting beliefs as well. Careers are quite long now, and quite long in terms of the linear line of, well, I'm 60 or 65, I can retire now. Okay, by age limit, that's now changed, but also, people are much more expecting to work and work longer, and perhaps work until they drop, almost really. So, in order to survive with that, getting rid of some of those or working with those self-limiting beliefs is pretty critical. So, judgment, decision making, rapid action, leaders or followers, we all need to grab hold of these in terms of how can I learn faster? How can I get to a decision in a much quicker way? What piece of knowledge will I need to have in order to make that judgment call earlier? And sometimes, get it wrong. Sometimes you have to seek forgiveness. My previous boss used to say to me, seek forgiveness at least once. If you make 10 decisions, you get one wrong, you've got 9 in the bank that you got it right. So, give things a go in that space where maybe encouraging leaders to learn faster, to inform their knowledge, but also then maybe fail faster and make decisions faster as such, and learn from failure. Real proposition is in terms of learning agility, perfect isn't doable anymore. Nearly will have to do, as long as you don't get your fingers burnt as a leader and you take the right risks. So they're the 4 pillars of the 21st century leadership model that I proposed. I'd be really interested in your observations. Okay, so I've got a question come in. How do people learn, develop and embed these skills unless they're pointed out to them? Yeah, I mean, there's probably 2 questions in that, and I think it comes down, I think, to probably a question of sort of like question or motivation around learning there, really. So, I guess all of us, when we started out on a learning journey, we might have done that individually through a sense of curiosity about something. We just happened to pick up the right book or be interested in a particular topic. I fortunately bumped into a mentor in my late 20s, and he talked to me about things like formal education, and then he would share articles and sort of newspaper cuttings with me in terms of growing my knowledge. So I think it's quite difficult without people either being personally motivated or being in an environment where they are encouraged to learn by the sort of pressure to learn in terms of keeping up with what needs to be done. But otherwise, sort of cultures and organisations and individuals that promote learning as a positive thing, really. And I think without the role of leaders leading leaders, leaders leading followers here, it's pretty difficult to do that because not everybody is individually motivated to go and learn.